Alright, now that I went and I ripped off all the defects, and I believe it was this board that I ripped them off, and I think it was also this one, I went ahead and I joined those edges as you should for squaring your board. And the next thing I want to deal with is making sure that I have the proper orientation of my boards. Okay? And what I want to do is I kind of want to look my boards over and see which side I want facing up. This one here I chose to have this side face down just because that knot was a little close to the edge, so I wanted it to be centered. This one here has a larger knot and a defect in it, and it's just not going to, it won't really look that appealing. So this one has a little bit better face, so I decided to go with that. This one was a hoarser piece, and I decided to place this one towards the outside because when it comes time for final glue up, this will most likely be my best edge here, and this I'll be able to cut the majority of it, if not all of this off. Okay? So I want to go ahead and I want to start looking at the overall face of my board. Okay? So what faces do I want placed up? Now, once I have that, I want to start looking at the grain. Okay? And I want to try to hide the joints. So again, in woodworking, you want to try to hide the joints as much as possible. So I want the grain to kind of go together. And these two boards, they look similar. I could have something like this. It's just a matter of opinion. Okay, and I could do something like that. Two similar grains, but again, then I have that knot right in the center, and it draws the eye right towards that joint because I have a whole circle here, and then it's cut off. It's a nice machine cut. Okay, and I don't want that. So I can start moving them around. I could try doing something like this. Here I have a difference in color. Kind of see if I tip this up that the grain looks decent, but the overall color doesn't quite seem to match. You have a little bit more yellow on the ends, and then in the middle it's kind of pinkish looking. Okay, so not only want to deal with what face goes up, I want to deal with grain direction and also grain color. So again, what I had here was what I found to be the best situation. Again, the grain doesn't necessarily hide the joints perfectly, you can kind of tell, but it does decent for matching the color-wise, rather than having, again, kind of the peachy color inside the yellow. So what I want to do, once I have that, is I want to double-check that what I have is that the annual rings are going the right direction. And what I mean by that is you want to have something called smile, frown, smile, okay? So, or alternating grain. And what that does is that if this top was to warp, it would warp more evenly, okay? Instead of having all of them face one way, you're basically putting them back into the position that they were on the tree. And if that the reason why it warps is that the rings tend to expand, okay? So what I want to do is alternate that warp, those rings, so that if it does warp, it warps more consistently instead of all in one direction. So if you notice here, I've highlighted the annual rings, and what I've done is I've, again, gone to smile, frown, smile. So on here, the center of the tree was up here, and the rings grew around it. On this middle board, I have the annual ring, the center of the tree down here, and the annual rings going around it. And then lastly, the same on the top, or on the last board, you have your center of your tree here, and then the annual rings growing around it, okay? So I have they're alternating, and what I would suggest doing is, if I flip these over, you kind of see that when I have them all figured out, I actually want to mark them, what order they go in, so that once I have this, if I end up not being able to get to this step all in one day, I can come back and remember which one I had in place. The last thing you want to deal with once you have everything situated, is you want to make sure that your joints themselves are going to be nice and tight. And the way we kind of figure out how that's going to happen is you should be able to lay your boards together and apply just a slight amount of pressure. And when that happens, if you have a nice tight joint, you won't be able to see any black in between the two boards. Okay? If you do, what you need to do is end up taking it back over to the joiner and joining that edge clean. If you end up taking let's say that this joint here wasn't a decent joint. It had something like this, a black gap on there. You ended up jointing this edge here and this edge. If you join it more, each edge once, and it's still there, come and see me and we'll figure it out. It may just be really warped, or you may be using the machine wrong, okay? So we want to make sure that we're not jointing too much so that we get rid of our overhang, okay? Because remember, we're going to maintain that finish overhang, 1-inch overhang. So what I should do here is I want to make sure that once I have my boards orientated due to grain color, and then the annual rings in the best face facing up, then I want to go ahead and check my joints. Okay? And again, that's done by just a slight amount of pressure, and they should fit tightly with, against one another.